The moment a man begins to leave you is never the moment he actually walks out. His departure doesn't start with a slammed door or a packed bag. It starts in the quiet, in the small fractures you barely notice, until you're standing knee-deep in the rubble, wondering how someone can vanish while still sitting 3 feet away from you. If you want the truth, and not the comforting, hallmark-flavored lie, here it is. Men don't leave relationships. They abandon them internally and wait for the body to catch up. Most women confuse physical presence with emotional presence. They see the man still occupying the space next to them, still dropping his socks on the floor like a domesticated toddler, still eating dinner at the same table, still breathing the same air. They assume that means the relationship is intact. But a man can sit beside you while being continents away mentally, spiritually, psychologically. His body is the ghost. His mind is the haunted house. The hook here is simple. If you've ever thought a man left you out of nowhere, you weren't paying attention. He left long before he told you. Every emotional exit begins the same way. He stops narrating his inner world. A man in love gives you his thoughts the way a compulsive gambler gives away money. Recklessly, instinctively, without hesitation. When he begins rationing that access, when silence becomes his default currency, understand, he isn't protecting his peace. He's protecting his departure. There's a detachment men perform that looks serene from the outside, but internally, it's pure calculation. They withdraw affection the way a monarch withdraws privilege. Slowly, strategically, one small gesture at a time. Touch becomes mechanical. Eye contact becomes accidental. Conversations shrink to exchanges of logistical data. It's not cruelty. It's insulation. He's padding his emotional exit so he doesn't feel the impact when he finally jumps. Women often misinterpret this phase as stress, exhaustion, overwork, or temporary overwhelm. But stress doesn't make a man emotionally disappear. Stress makes him irritable, loud, reactive. Emotional exit makes him calm. Too calm. Calm in that eerie, placid, glassy way lakes appear just before someone drowns in them. There's a research study that perfectly captures this transition. A 2012 study from the University of Utah found that when men emotionally disengage from a partner, the brain activity associated with empathy and reward drops sharply, long before any verbal acknowledgement of dissatisfaction. Meaning, the neurological shutdown happens first. The honesty about it comes last, if at all. The brain exits before the man does. He's not an enigma. He's just a coward in slow motion. The irony? While he is emotionally exiting, he often becomes nicer, polite, softer, sometimes unnervingly agreeable. Conflict disappears not because harmony exists, but because participation does not. You cannot have conflict with someone who has quietly opted out of the dynamic. That's why so many women get blindsided. They see the absence of fighting as peace. Meanwhile, he sees it as a comfortable holding cell, while he figures out where he's moving next. Men emotionally exit the same way they emotionally invest. Privately, without announcements, in a world entirely in their own heads. You were not invited into the meeting where he decided this was over. You don't get to sit in the room while he weighs the pros and cons of his own ambivalence. He retreats into himself, rewrites the narrative, and edits out your significance before he even tells you the plot has changed. He's already prepared the speech. He's already justified the story. He's already cast himself as the misunderstood hero, escaping the cruelty of stagnation. By the time he speaks the words, "I think we need to talk," he isn't nervous. He isn't unsure. He's relieved. He's been carrying this secret in his chest like a smug little talisman for months. The tragedy, and the comedy, is that by the time the truth reaches you, it's already a corpse. You've been grieving fresh. He's been grieving in advance. What women usually do next is predictable, almost ritualistic. They try to revive the corpse. They initiate. They over-explain. They apologize for things that are not even sins. They turn themselves into a resuscitation team for a man who already left the building emotionally and resents them for trying to glue him back together. A man who has emotionally exited cannot be pulled back in, not because he's incapable of returning, but because returning would require confronting the cowardice of his exit. And men would rather swallow fire than face their own emotional mess. And here is where your real power begins, whether you're willing to admit it or not. The woman who recognizes the emotional exit early, who refuses to negotiate with a ghost, who walks away before he finishes his slow-motion escape, that woman terrifies men. She interrupts the script. She cuts short the grand performance of martyrdom he was preparing. She exposes the truth he hoped would stay safely hidden under his calm exterior. That he didn't leave because he outgrew you. He left because he couldn't keep up with you. Most men emotionally exit relationships they secretly feel unworthy of maintaining. They don't leave because they're strong. They leave because they feel small. And if they can exit their own emotions early enough, they don't have to feel the inadequacy. They can blame the relationship. They can blame you. They can blame timing, fatigue, the alignment of the planets. Anything except the reality that the emotional exit is a self-protective maneuver disguised as maturity. You're not losing a man who was present. You're losing a man who mastered the art of appearing present. He keeps the body there because the body prevents questions. The body prevents accountability. The body buys him time. Emotional presence demands vulnerability. Physical presence just demands inertia. Men choose inertia every time. And you, if you've ever lived this, gets trapped in the illusion. You keep telling yourself, he's still here. When the truth is that here is not a location. It's an investment. His body is here. His allegiance is not. Now, we're barely getting started. But here's where this becomes important for you. The emotional exit isn't something you learn to stop. It's something you learn to read. Once you can read it, you never get blindsided again. You recognize the early signs not with panic, but with detachment. You shift your energy. You stop chasing. You stop softening yourself to make him comfortable. You stop performing CPR on a relationship that died in his mind before you even knew it was sick. And later in this video, yes, I said later, because this deserves the full post-mortem, I'll show you exactly how women regain the upper hand once they understand this psychological escape pattern men use. But for now, understand this. The emotional exit is not something he does to you. It's something he does away from himself. You're just the collateral damage. And if you're tired of being collateral damage, you should not be navigating this alone. That's why, in the middle of this video, I'm going to tell you how to work with me one-on-one. I've pinned the coaching details in the comment section. And I'll explain exactly why one-on-one coaching changes everything for women stuck in these cycles. Women who keep attracting men who exit emotionally because they never learn to recognize the early tremors. For now, let this sink in. A man doesn't emotionally exit because you failed. He exits because he's afraid of the version of himself he becomes in your presence. Men leave women who see them too clearly. And you're about to start seeing them clearer than they can stand. The real cruelty of a man's emotional exit is not the silence you notice, it's the silence you don't. The quiet shifts that slide under the radar, because they register more like atmospheric changes than behavior. A temperature drop, a dimming of light, a barely perceptible shift in gravity. You feel it in your stomach before you ever see it in his actions. It is a withdrawal so subtle that if you try to point it out, you sound paranoid, dramatic, insecure, everything he secretly hopes you will believe about yourself, so he doesn't have to explain what he's doing. Men have an instinct for plausible deniability. They retreat emotionally in a way that leaves no fingerprints. If you accuse him of detaching, he can shrug and blame work, stress, the season, anything except the truth. And the truth is simple. He doesn't want to be held accountable for the emotional exit until he has already completed it. He doesn't want you waking up to the evacuation plan while he's still in the building. Here is the part no one warns you about. A man who is emotionally exiting becomes profoundly boring, not because he lacks depth, but because he no longer offers you access to it. He becomes a hollowed-out version of himself, a man performing the role of boyfriend with the enthusiasm of an understudy who wants to get fired. He gives you the bare minimum in conversation, in affection, in engagement, because giving you more would expose his hand. That's the twisted logic of male detachment. He withholds not because he has nothing left to give, but because giving would confirm the intimacy he is already trying to escape. The absurdity is that he wants you to pull away first. Men love when women break for them. It makes the exit cleaner. It allows them to feel righteous, justified, victimized. If you pull back, he gets to say, "See, you weren't trying." If you lean in, he gets to say, "See, this is too much." The emotional exit creates a perfect double bind for you and a perfect alibi for him. What makes this even more grotesque is how predictable he becomes. A man who has emotionally checked out often experiences the ego boost of imagining himself as a man in demand, a desirable figure brimming with unclaimed potential. He begins entertaining fantasies of alternative futures, alternative women, alternative lives. He doesn't necessarily cheat. He just restructures his emotional life so the exit feels like an upgrade instead of a degradation. The relationship becomes a room he has mentally packed before he's bothered to fold a single shirt. There's a psychological phenomenon called preemptive distancing, documented in a 2018 study from the University of Toronto. It found that people anticipating guilt or discomfort in a relationship unconsciously begin behaving as if the connection has already ended. They pull away emotionally, show disengagement, and reduce vulnerability, all in an effort to protect their self-image from the shame of causing harm. Men excel at this. They are virtuosos of preemptive distancing. They would rather starve the relationship slowly than face the guilt of ending it cleanly. This is why you begin to feel like an unwelcome guest in a home you helped build. He gives you polite courtesy instead of intimacy, small talk instead of emotional connection. The way he touches you changes first. He touches you like he's checking your temperature, not your body. The way he looks at you changes next. He looks at you like someone reviewing a photograph, rather than a person. A memory, not a presence. And you can feel your dignity slipping as you work harder to reanimate him. You smile wider, speak softer, become more agreeable, more patient, more accommodating, performing emotional acrobatics to preserve a bond he already snipped internally. This is where women lose themselves. not because they lack strength, but because they confuse effort with impact. You are trying to revive a version of him that died without ceremony. Men exploit a woman's loyalty without even meaning to. Their emotional exit is powered by the knowledge that you will keep trying long after they have stopped. And try you will, because you remember the man he was. You remember the warmth, the presence, the attention, the pull. You remember the early days when he opened himself so easily. You mistook it for permanence. You keep waiting for that man to return, not realizing he left months ago and didn't leave a forwarding address. The shift becomes most obvious when you stop asking questions, not because you've given up, but because you're tired of decoding half-hearted answers. You stop initiating difficult conversations because you already know what he'll say. Nothing. Or worse, something hollow enough to make you feel foolish for caring. And in that silence, you realize you're not speaking to a man anymore. You're speaking to his absence. This is the emotional exit in its purest form. He becomes a ghost, and you become the haunted. And now we arrive at the part of the video where I talk to you directly. Not the version of you who is wounded, but the version of you who is waking up. You cannot conquer what you refuse to see. And if you keep losing yourself in relationships, if you keep loving men who exit mentally before they exit physically, then you need guidance that goes beyond intuition. This is where the one-on-one coaching comes in. I've pinned it in the comments section and added it in the description. Coaching is not about coddling your emotions. It's about sharpening your perception. It's strategy, clarity, psychological literacy. It's having someone who can dissect the dynamic without bias, someone who can expose the pattern while you're still too close to see its shape. Women who coach with me stop guessing. They stop chasing. They stop blaming themselves for men who were already gone. They get the framework that prevents this kind of emotional ambush from ever happening again. And yes, the landing page is live. The free PDF is there. The free video is there. The newsletter is there. The material I can't post publicly goes in the newsletter, because platforms get nervous about the truth. And if you're serious about mastering these dynamics, instead of simply surviving them, pre-order The Feminine Game while you're there. That course is the blueprint, not the soft, romanticized version of femininity people feed you. The real version, the psychological version, the version that understands male attachment and detachment with surgical accuracy. But let's return to the man for a moment, because his story is not finished. By the time he begins physically distancing himself, coming home later, giving you shorter responses, suddenly needing more alone time, the emotional exit is already complete. You are not witnessing the exit. You are witnessing the aftershocks. He is not conflicted. He is not confused. He is simply waiting for the right moment to announce the decision he already made. Men treat breakups like parachute jumps. They want the conditions to be perfect before they leap, even though they already pulled the cord months ago. The tragedy is that you could walk away right now, and he'd still convince himself that he left you. That's the delusion men cling to during emotional exits. They rewrite the narrative to preserve their ego. The relationship died because you changed, because you stopped being supportive, because you weren't listening, because work got stressful, because he outgrew you, because fate whispered something to him. Anything except the truth. He dismantled his own desire before he ever had the courage to tell you. What he fears is accountability. What he hopes for is a clean escape. What he never expects is for you to beat him to the exit. And that is where your power lives. There's a moment in every emotional exit where the woman finally wakes up. Not because he told her anything, not because he changed dramatically, but because reality eventually stops knocking and starts kicking the door in. You look at him and realize he's not looking back. Not really. Not with awareness. Not with recognition. He's looking through you in that soft, absent, fogged glass way. People look at objects they have not yet decided whether to discard or keep out of guilt. The truth hits like a slow burn. You're still in the relationship, but you're no longer in it with him. You're now inhabiting separate psychic rooms, and he's already redecorating his. By the time you reach this point, this sick, heavy moment of clarity, you are not dealing with the man you fell for. You are dealing with the echo of a man who left months ago, and that echo has no interest in explaining itself. Echoes do not explain. They repeat. They distort. They mock. It is here, in this final stage of his emotional exit, that you face the grotesque punchline. The man you are fighting for is gone, and the man you are left with isn't worth fighting for. There is something almost impressive in the way men manufacture inevitability. They detach quietly, then behave as though the detachment is a natural phenomenon, like gravity or seasonal weather changes, rather than something they engineered behind the locked doors of their own mind. They rewrite the plot so seamlessly that by the time the relationship collapses, they feel like spectators instead of saboteurs. They look at the emotional wreckage with a kind of calm resignation, as if surveying storm damage they had no hand in creating. This is the cruel brilliance of the emotional exit. He destroys nothing. He simply withdraws his energy and lets nature take the blame. You end up feeling responsible for the hollowing, even though he's the one who gutted the house and left you to sweep the floor. And here's the darkest truth of all. The more empathetic the woman, the easier the emotional exit becomes for him. Empathy turns you into the perfect accomplice. You explain his behavior for him. You make excuses so he doesn't have to. You soften the blow he intends to deliver. You stand in front of the wreckage trying to gather the pieces while he stands behind you, already halfway out the door emotionally, and rehearsing his closing remarks. Women think they're preserving the relationship. What they're really preserving is his comfort during the exit. If there is anything close to a universal pattern, it is this. A man rarely ends a relationship at the emotional height. He ends it at the emotional flatline. He waits until the connection is so starved, so underfed, so quiet, that the breakup barely registers. He aims for minimal disruption. He wants to slip out of the emotional contract like a man slipping out of a too-tight coat. Relieved, mildly guilty, but free. And you, infuriatingly, feel guilty for noticing the exit. You feel dramatic for pointing out what he's been rehearsing in silence. You feel ashamed for naming what he's hoping you'll stay too confused to articulate. Men rely on that confusion. It's the lubricant that makes the emotional exit frictionless. But here's the plot twist men never expect. Once a woman sees the pattern, truly sees it, she can't unsee it. She can't go back to blaming herself. She can't go back to playing emotional detective. She can't go back to attributing his distance to her flaws, her tone, her reactions, her timing. She sees the exit for what it is, a private plan disguised as emotional exhaustion. And once she recognizes that plan, she can decide whether to keep waiting for a man who is already gone, or to let the door hit him on the way out mentally. even if he's still standing in the kitchen pretending he hasn't packed. This is where your power finally arrives. Not the power to bring him back. Not the power to change him. The power to stop performing CPR on a man who left the hospital before the diagnosis. Because when a woman walks away first, from the emotional wreckage he created but tried to pretend he inherited, men feel something they are completely unprepared for. The collapse of the narrative. He loses his scripted ending. He loses his hero role. He loses the comforting illusion that he was the one who made the decision. He loses the luxury of believing he drifted away naturally instead of strategically. Men crumble when they are denied their exit story. Most men emotionally exit because they assume you will stay until they decide otherwise. That assumption is the oxygen that keeps their detachment comfortable. Remove the oxygen, and the whole delusion suffocates. This is where it becomes devastating for him. When he eventually tries to return, because men who leave emotionally always reappear physically when the silence becomes too loud. He expects to find you waiting in confusion, still loyal to the version of him he abandoned. But instead, he finds something far more disorienting. You've detached. You stopped participating in the illusion. You stopped trying to read a man who had already erased himself. And that makes him panic. Men do not fear losing a relationship. They fear losing access to the version of themselves they only get when you believe in them. Once you stop believing, the mirror breaks. And he has to face the reflection he was running from when he emotionally exited in the first place. Now, before we continue tearing this apart, this is the moment in the video where I remind you that you're not supposed to be navigating these dynamics blind. I pinned the coaching link in the comments section. It's also in the description. If you're stuck in patterns with emotionally avoidant men, if you've been abandoning yourself while they quietly abandon you, this is where one-on-one coaching becomes necessary. It gives you structure. It gives you clarity. It gives you a psychological roadmap, so you stop getting ambushed by patterns disguised as partners. And the landing page is live. Go read the free PDF. Watch the free video. Subscribe to the newsletter. The real material goes there. The things I can't say publicly without someone fainting. This is what my weekly newsletter looks like. This is where I sometimes say things that YouTube doesn't let me say. I'll be sending 3 weekly, and make sure to check under promotions or spam folder for my emails. And while you're there, pre-order The Feminine Game. If you like the way I break down male psychology here, that course is the deep dive. It's everything you weren't taught. It's the rules behind the rules. Now let's finish this. The end of a man's emotional exit is anticlimactic. It always is. He expects fireworks, drama, tears. He imagines the breakup as a grand crescendo. But there is no crescendo. There is only a quiet understanding. The kind that settles into your bones like cold. You look at the man in front of you and realize that the only thing tying you together now is inertia. Not love. Not loyalty, not intimacy, just inertia. And that's when the most important moment happens. Not when he leaves. Not when he finally speaks. Not when he explains. The most important moment is when you stop caring about his explanation. Because nothing he says can resurrect the version of him that died before you even knew the funeral had begun. And that's the real reason women rise from these exits and men sink into them. Women grieve honestly. Men grieve in delay. The emotional exit protects them on the front end and punishes them on the back end. They don't feel the grief until after they lose access. After you detach. After you stop responding to the ghost. After you stop offering the emotional nourishment they were quietly relying on, even while they pretended to be gone. Women move on when the relationship ends. Men move on when the woman does. If you've ever lived this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you like this video, subscribe. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever walked away before he finished exiting? Did he come back? And more importantly, did you let him? I want to hear the moment you realize the emotional exit wasn't your failure. It was his. Welcome to the dark side of your mind, an armory disguised as advice. Everything here exists to give you clarity sharper than the games being played against you. The reading is where I dissect your situation with precision. What he meant, what he didn't, what you missed. About 1,000 words, plus one follow-up question to tighten the strategy. The case file is the full autopsy, a complete psychological breakdown in writing, plus a private audio message so you hear the parts most people avoid. One follow-up to lock it in. If you want speed, there's the whisper. 400 words. Direct. Unfiltered. No extra dialogue. If you prefer tone and voice, the weight of the message itself, the transmission gives you a private audio response. No follow-up. No hand-holding. And if your situation is messy enough for multiple angles, buy 2 services, and the third is free. Strategy rewards commitment. If you want the truth delivered publicly, without exposing yourself, there's the public whisper. One question, one strategic answer, posted for others to learn from. Short, clean, no follow-up. You already know why you're here. You ask your question, and within 72 hours, you get clarity most people never develop. Emotional discipline, psychological leverage, the ability to stop repeating patterns that drain you. The dark side of your mind isn't here to soothe you. It's here to change how you move.